Welcome to this second webinar in our series of 4. And this one's on the foundational elements of shamanic astrology. And Daniel's been doing amazing research and has some really fun things to share with us. Some you may have heard before if you've listened to anything shamanic astrology, but a lot of it will be really new and interesting. So what do you want to start us out with, Daniel?
Well, just I had an opportunity again this morning to see the most fascinating lineup of those 3 planets coming together as Jupiter moves even closer to Pluto. And actually, the effect on me is pretty strong, I'll have to say, because it's of course right on my moon and my IC. I first want to say apologize. We don't have so much of a PowerPoint for you today. I know Cayelin had some challenges yesterday, and so did I, because just some of the stuff happening around it's not, I don't know if it's in the U.S. news, but about what's happening in the Philippines with the total lockdown and crime break-in, stuff like that. So it's not, the last 24 hours was not the the easiest time over here. But I have had an opportunity to go over the foundational elements, and here's the plan for today. Maybe the first third of this, I'm going to share who were the primary inspirers of this paradigm, and then you'll see kind of how it all started and why it's what it is. You saw a little bit yesterday, those who were on the call yesterday, sort of the whole development along the timeline and where we are in the greater cycles. Keep in mind as we go through today's class that to remember to use that 3-world approach, so remembering the upper world, the middle world, and the underworld all happening simultaneously, trying to recognize all 3. So anyway, the first third, I'm going to be talking a little bit about Dane Rudhyar, Rudolf Steiner, Sri Aurobindo, Carl Jung, actually, possibly one of my early inspirations, even before I got into astrology, was Albert Camus. All these things go into the foundation of this approach. But then the last part, the greater part of today, will be showing everybody to tune in to what are the most basic elements of a chart to be able to accomplish what the purpose of the astrological paradigm of shamanic astrology hopes to share with people, to impart tools for, which is to, as quickly as possible, ascertain your life purpose, what your place on the wheel is, what you're called to do at a time like now, at a great turning of the ages. What are the most potent tools on the chart that you can look at in order to get that information? So we'll be like looking at the 144 storylines, and we'll be looking at the Ascendant, the angles of the chart. By having an opportunity to go back and look at Rudhyar's work, I was able to see, God, no wonder that it all started that way, because some of those principles that were established back then are at the core of this approach. So actually, I want to begin by reading the very first paragraph of my second book, Origins of the Shamanic Astrology Handbook. The paradigm. In the Bhagavad Gita, it is written, "It is better to do one's dharma, or duty, however defective it may be, than to follow the dharma of another, however well one may perform it. It is better to die doing one's dharma, for to do the dharma of another is fraught with danger. Those who do their own dharma as their nature reveals it never sin." Now, that is really foundational to why we do what we do. Like to say it in a humorous way, it's like that T-shirt that says, "Be yourself, everyone else is already taken." But what does that mean to know the process of individuation, how to know yourself? How can the chart help that? Well, I found this remarkable quote, and I want to thank Kadia and also Taylor, who actually did do some of the research on coming up with some of these quotes. So this one that I think I'm going to share with you now is from Rudhyar, way back, like I think 1970. When you don't follow your nature, there is a hole in the universe where you were supposed to be. Now, what this relates to is the whole aim of what he created, which was a school of transpersonal astrology, which then morphed in through my own work into shamanic astrology, and then the creation together with Cayelin of the school. Transpersonal meant that astrology was not about prediction. It was not secular. It was not about statistics. It was not about something that, quote, science can, quote, prove. He actually warned against that. Basically, he felt that astrology, for it to be useful at all, is to help us discover what universal intent was at the moment of your birth. It's kind of like many are called, few are chosen, in a certain sense, that you have a possible destiny. How did he put that? He said, individuation, more than simply becoming a whole person, should not mean only having become a whole person according to a certain style of life. It should imply freedom from the collective and from an unconscious compulsive bondage to the values of one's particular culture. What I realized back in those days in the early 70s, when it was really possible to think along these lines, before astrology for the most part kind of became more predictive again, more old style secular astrology, was that astrology was designed to help us find what our purpose in the universe is. Now, this related all the way back to something I learned when I was a philosophy major. It's like creating meaning out of chaos, which is part of what the human endeavor is. Actually, Camus was the one who influenced me in that way. So if the universe is absurd, if it's just a crapshoot, it's the purpose of a human being to find meaning and purpose within that chaos. And transpersonal, Rudhyar's original formulation was all about that, being able to see what the universal, great mystery had in mind at that moment that you came in as a human being. Now, there's so many things. One of the things that we're going to share, I didn't get to have a chance to do it, otherwise we'd have a screen on this. All of you who are on this call are going to get a collection of these best quotes from these different people that I'm going to be just briefly talking about here. The other individual that was very influential, another individual who was very influential, was Rudolf Steiner. Now, all through the years that I've been involved with this type of astrology, I've always run into people involved with the Waldorf school. And they are amazing people. I mean, basically their whole school system uses astrology, a particular type of astrology that influenced shamanic astrology called astrosophy. And recently, my current hero who's trying to help people with the coronavirus is a guy named Dr. Klinghardt, a German doctor and scientist. He was the mentor of Mercola. And he is a total Steiner individual. Also, the Steiner work has come into recent awareness through the work of Tom Cohen, who spoke of something that Steiner wrote in 1917, right when radar was introduced. During World War I, Steiner made a very curious statement. He said that now that we have non-native EMF, it's going to be much, much harder to be fully human. And he said that in 1917. And of course, ever since then, it's like this, the AMF bombardment, which is non-native, is just bumped up higher and higher and higher. Relate that to what we were talking about with regards to Kali Yuga and, you know, where we are in the greater cycles. Something is coming to an end. And all these thinkers, you know, like Rudhyar and Steiner and Aurbindo, who I'm going to mention here in a moment, were aware of the, quote, crisis of so-called Western civilization. And the Seed People document that we discussed yesterday also shows what Rudhyar was thinking in 1973. So Steiner, it's from the astrosophy and from Steiner that shamanic astrology came up with. It was actually written in the 20s, actually, this information, the necessity to having two zodiacs and to name them different things. We got that, shamanic astrology got that from the astrosophy and from Steiner, which is that you name the constellations by something other than the names of the signs. So you can have some sense of this whole 26,000 year precessional cycle, that there's different meanings to different zodiacs. So that came from that. A lot of other inputs went into shamanic astrology from originally Steiner's. Steiner was also a tremendous thinker regarding the wholeness of the human race, like a tremendous critic of Hitler and of white nationalism, and seeing like all human beings as first as full as we're all human beings, and not this, you know, like my race against this race and so on. Steiner was huge for that. Now Aurobindo, and incidentally, these are all people that influenced Rudhyar. Jung influenced Rudhyar, Steiner, Aurobindo, Theosophy, Baha'i. They were all influences on Rudhyar. And so what Aurobindo contributed in the most part to the shamanic astrology paradigm was the concept of involution, the reciprocity of evolution and involution. His whole approach was that so-called ascension, and that word is bandied about in so many different ways, it comes only when the fullness of spirit has completely went into the depth of materiality. So like bringing spirit totally down into the body, into the earth, into everything that exists on a material level. So it's not like a later theocratic Buddhist approach of like, let's get off the wheel, you know, or let's just go to the higher chakras, but rather bringing consciousness down into the depths of our incarnation, and hence to be fully human. So that concept of involution is hugely in our school. Why? Well, how do we know that? Well, in virtually all the understandings we have of the mystery schools, that you have some that are archetypally masculine, you have some that are archetypally feminine. It's not about men and women, but it's like some energies are more evolutionary, some of them are more involutionary, and they work together. One is not better or worse than another, and that's also partly why I decided at a certain point to not call it transpersonal astrology, but shift it into the shamanic astrology approach, which is, so it's earth-centered. And actually, Rudhyar said the following thing regarding that, if I can quickly find that quote. Oh gosh, where did it go? Here. The self awakens only as it connects the earth. Now, I mean, that pretty much says it all there, you know. So as you all know through the years that I have given presentations, talks, and whatever, I speak for DNA, I speak for carbon-based life, I speak for our shamanic connection to the indigenous, and embracing the whole process of life and death and life and death and life and death, you know, that's humanness that really makes us, whatever our function in universe is. One other thing, I don't want to take the full time of this class to have it all be philosophical here. There's so much from Jung, so much from post-Jungians. Those of you who know the sacred marriage, inner sacred marriage process, which is one of the crown jewels of shamanic astrology, know that much of that was originally inspired by Jung's work of the anima and the animus, and we've taken that further. And there's that wonderful quote, I have it on my wall here, of Jung. He says, "If I had 10 years left to live, I would spend it all studying astrology." Which, anyway, linking these great streams of human consciousness and human potential, you know, beyond some kind of thing. Maybe I'll just end this particular portion of our investigation by the birth chart has to be understood as the archetype or seed pattern of one's individual being, as the symbolic form of one's individuality or individuation, and therefore also of one's destiny, for the two are identical. So the idea here really is not some sort of secular mainstream approach. That's why, of course, why we also don't do sun sign astrology, which I think is a relic of monotheism, and actually enforces the patriarchal one principle among others. The soul is polytheistic. That's one of the things I got in the 70s from the the mythology, from Hillman, from Jung, and so on. The essential purpose of astrology is not so much to tell us what we'll meet on our road, as it is to suggest how to meet it, and the basic reason for the meeting. Which quality in us, which type of strength is needed to go through any specific phase of our total unfoldment as an individual person. Same thing with the teaching in shamanic astrology of the initiation cycles of the timeline of our lives. It's not like, okay, we are certain a certain kind of thing is going to happen. We don't predict an event. It's more like, what are the ways of navigating a specific kind of initiation? How will you meet that? How can you perceive that as part of your own transformational journey? How can you meet that challenge, crisis, or however you want to name it, in order to be able to take your place on the wheel, to fulfill what it is that the universal intent had in mind when you birthed, at that specific time, at that specific place, in that specific culture, in that specific environment, time period in history, and so on. So, I mean, I think that's a little bit of the background here of the philosophical foundation, but that goes into how we came up with these basic tools.
Daniel,
and in fact, yes,
go forward with that. I just want to say, because I want people to understand or to realize that just because of the time factor, we weren't able to get these quotes all created, but they will be created in a document.
Yes, I did mention that.
We'll get them. And who said what?
Yes. Yeah. Oh, right. Of course.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Because somebody's going, yeah, whose quote was that? Wow.
So, and we're also going to include the birth charts of Rudhyar, Aurbindo, Steiner, Jung.
Yes.
Which
so
should
it
be
also
very
helps to have them written, and so you can see them and reread them and all of that. So having heard them now is like, whoa. But also then being able to connect with them again. So just know that that is coming. Yes. And it will probably be sometime tomorrow when we get all that together. But just letting you know. And probably by the time this video, when we send out the announcement, the video is posted. So.
I just noticed one last little one that I can't help but want to squeeze in here. We could say, I'm going to paraphrase it from the perspective of shamanic astrology. but he originally wrote it, transpersonal astrology. Shamanic astrology develops on the foundation that humanistic astrology has built. It occupies itself not only in the sense, not essentially with what a person is, but what that person should be. That is, with what he could be if that person actualized their birth potentialities and were unreservedly and effectively dedicated to the process of transformation, not only within his own nature, but within his social, cultural, and even geographical environment. I mean, that's just what I was, wow. I mean, I just am so thankful that my first astrology teacher said, before you read anybody else's books, read all of Rudhyar. And a more recent example of this was that my favorite current astrologer, Mark Jones from England, who started out as an evolutionary astrologer, he now gives talks and he says, forget Jeff Green, forget evolutionary astrology, forget Stephen Forrest, just go back to Rudhyar. That's where it all came from. So anyway, at the very end, I have maybe one other philosophical thing I want to present, but now let's go into something more practical. In this type of astrology, we always start with the moon. It's the moon symbol that most tells us where you've come from, like where what essence you had before. It's not a literal past life thing, although you can look at it if you want that way. It's sort of like a jumping off point, you know, what were my talents and skills, but also what were my attitudes and habits and expectations, you know, when I came into the life. And so it's not like the moon, and the moon in this system is not female. It's not the mother. It's gods and goddesses are all in the moon. So it's just like the Aquarius moon lineage is not going to be the feeling function, okay? It's like dropping in from somewhere. And they're all equally valid, they're all important, even though each culture at any time period in history may have judgments for or against certain ones. Might be harder for someone born biologically female to have certain moon positions, harder for biological men to have certain moon positions, but they're all equally valid. So we come in from the moon, from the tribe of the moon. We call it your tribe. We could also think of it as your mystery school. So I always look, when I do any session, always start with like seeing where the moon was. You know, that's who you used to be. It's like the lineage is the word we use for that. There aren't too many other schools of astrology that look at the moon that way. Although some more and more people that I run into are beginning to see this, because otherwise, if we look at the moon in the regular way, it's then a relic of a certain culture, of a certain time, with a certain view toward gender, toward sex, toward even language. You know, Romance languages that will say something is supposed to be masculine or feminine. At least English doesn't do that. But then once you know what the moon position is, and then you have some degree of compassion about that, no judgment. I mean, we can all be compassionate about the moon position. I have to be extremely compassionate at this point with my own Capricorn moon, being scrunched, initiated, expanded, blocked, composted by Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto right now. Oh, to be here in 2020 to have this happening. And some of you will be on the front lines, some of you will not be, but we're all encountering the collective force at this point. But what is your place on the wheel? How to tell what is your place on the wheel? What tools in shamanic astrology can help us to see what our place on the wheel is, and then have the courage to choose that, to have the capacity to accomplish what universal intent or great mystery had in mind with your birth. So a foundational piece that a lot of times even people that have been in the school for a long time have some confusion about, and not a full grasp on it, is this one of the 4 crown jewels of the system, which is the 144 storylines. Okay. Now, for some of you are long-term students or practitioners of this approach. Some of you are maybe be hearing this for the first time. The idea here is that every mystery school, and that could be perceived of as the moon, where you've come from, like Capricorn moon. I used to be a graduate of the University of Capricorn, but there would be 12 majors, 12 versions of it. The rising sign is like a destination point. And little did I know, until I went back and looked at Rudhyar's work again, that this is what he says about the Ascendant. The zodiac sign on the Ascendant normally tells us much concerning the dharma of the individual, that is, the central potentiality which the person should seek consciously to actualize as a vessel or lens through which the divine may act. It's very different than saying, well, it's how you look, it's your persona, you know, your mask or something like that. No. It's actually the main clue. In fact, all 4 angles on the chart are what truly individuate the individual. It makes you have a special destiny. But in this way I'm sharing now, you can look at the rising sign, which, you know, whichever 12, one of the 12 it is, that's a mystery school. It's a school of life. And the moon is also a school of life. The moon is where you've come from. The ascendant is what you're moving toward. But it's not just 12. It's 12 times 12. So we have 144. So we have the sacred geometry, 144. So to get this sense of the journey of your soul, you come from not just a certain tribe, but you had a specialty in that tribe. And that is based upon the house position of the south node of the moon. Now, for this real exact precision, to really know this information, to kind of get a sense of it and tune into it, and kinesthetically and emotionally, gut level, tune into it, it is true, you need a birth time. Yeah, so, you know, when a person does not have a birth time, then what I'll do, what we do in the school, what we teach in the school, is to look at the Venus and Mars position as the clues, or look at Jupiter as the clues. Those are very important, incredibly important, even when you know the angles. But if you know your birth time, then you will know the house position of the south node of the moon. And that will say what your specialty was. You know, what your mastery was when you came into the life. Not just your mastery, but also your addictions, your over-identifications, you know, who you really take yourself to be, which at some point in our life has to be dissolved, let go of. I mean, not just like on any spiritual path. Who we took ourselves to be is not who we really are. But what I'm speaking now about would be, what would be the clues on the chart about why you're here now? It certainly does take into account what you've brought with you into the life. So if you know your ascendant, that is going to tell you the mystery school you're signing up for. If you know the house position of the north node of the moon, then that is going to give the most important clue as to what version of it. Like, in my case, I'm Libra Rising, Cayelin, Scorpio Rising. But then what version of Scorpio Rising, or what version of Libra Rising? I have the north node of the moon in the 8th house. Now, in what Rudhyar called originally in his books in the 30s, he called astrology the algebra of life. And if you take this all the way back to the Hellenistic transmissions, and when they invented the seasonal or the directional zodiac, they created what is called a zodiac archetype. Houses and signs are archetypally similar. They're not the same. I mean, basically a sign is an archetype, but the house is where it is being expressed. Actually, when we teach the techniques of chart analysis, people say, well, what about the houses? What about the houses? Well, it's part of life purpose. The house placement of a planet is where that planet is best, how do we say, intended to be used in the current life, intended to be used. It's like a set of instructions. But when we look at the house positions of the nodes, we get really specific instructions, because the house position of the south node is from before. The house position of the north node is what the soul is moving toward as a set of instructions. Now, the thing that has been sometimes confusing is that what we call the jobs, you know, the 12 jobs in the 12 tribes, or the 12 majors in the 12 mystery schools. Maybe, Cayelin, this might be a good time to put up that,
Yeah.
We do have one. One thing.
This is a document you're all going to get. And it basically is a summary of what Daniel's talking about for each of the mystery schools, the job in the tribe. You'll also get a little summary for what it is as its God-Goddess expression, and also the shadow.
This particular thing you're looking at here, it says this mystery school investigates and Jupiter's quest for. So it's also the Jupiter position, and this is particularly important if you don't have a birth time. The Jupiter sign is similar to what is meant in that first quote that I shared about to know your Dharma. It's like a way of life, the sign of Jupiter. But if you know the rising sign, then you have an even more specific clue. So this, these statements associated with the mystery school here can be applied to the moon, it could be applied to the rising sign, it could be applied to Jupiter. It's like the primary issues that are associated with the 12 mystery schools. And it's important to remember that, and sorry for those of you that have heard all this before, but it's like, not sun signs, all right? This is a description of the mystery schools themselves. So if your moon is in Capricorn, well then, okay, what was that about? Okay, look at what the Capricorn mystery school is about. If you have Aries rising, you know, well then, okay, look at what the Aries mystery school is about. If you have Jupiter in Aries, you get that particular clue also. But the jobs. Now, you see, signs and houses are not the same. The house is like an expression of the sign. But this innovation, this thing that is, I mean, I'm tremendously into acknowledging where these insights come from, you know, and being able to go back and see, wow, that was from a jar. Wow, that was from Steiner. Wow, that was from astrosophy. Wow, that was from the Hellenistic. Wow. But this thing of the 144 storylines, I cannot. I guess it just came when I was sitting out there with the stones. I mean, this is something that kind of came through. And so and it's the foundation of any reading. I even did this a little bit back in the 70s, the very same kind of approach, these 12 jobs, 12 different versions of the moon, 12 different versions of the rising sign. It's not the easiest thing to get a feeling for, and each person is going to get a feeling for it in their own way. The Aries job, I mean, if you have the North Node in the first house, That does not mean, oh, it's Aries. No, but you can get clues from our knowledge of the first house and our knowledge of Aries to get what the first house job is. There has been a challenge sometimes, and when I share this with some other kinds of astrologers, where they don't like this idea that was first presented as the algebra of life, that was presented by the Zodiac archetype idea, that was actually Zip Dobbins in the early 70s, another early influence. She was really into this, which was looking at the archetypal similarity of signs and houses. Some current astrologers don't like that. But there is, to me, it works. But it's not exactly the same. So if you have the North Node in the first house, yeah, there are certain flavors that are like Aries, but that doesn't mean Aries. And also, it's not more important than the moon or the rising sign. It's just a variation of it. You know, so if you have the Aries job, let's say in the Taurus tribe, the Aries job in the Taurus tribe does not mean that this is Aries, that this is Taurus that's more like Aries. No, it's still Taurus. The investigation is still all about investigating Taurus, but it's an individual version of it. We could say a self version of it, not a collective version of it. And there's some of these that can get really tricky when you try to understand it. Like, I'll give you an example. Like, let us go, move the screen to Aquarius. Radical, revolutionary, eccentric with the widest view, free electron of the tribe. That would be the job. But what if you have Aquarius rising? Freedom from the known. These are free electrons, cosmic overview. What is the nature of freedom? It's like there's nothing more a free electron or free and unbounded and spacious than there is Aquarius. But what if you have the North Node of the moon in the 7th house? So then it becomes the Libra job. Social and relating experts of the tribe, the ones who have partners. Now this is blending together things you would not normally see. So here's the Aquarius rising, unbounded and free, but is basically has part of their life purpose to learn how to bond, but not to give up that spacious freedom, free electron nature, you know, how to do it in a radical, revolutionary way, but still with personal connections, which would be very different if it was Aquarius rising, say, with the Sagittarius job. Maybe just flip to the Sagittarius job. Philosopher, explorer, trail scout, theoretician, physical adventurer of the tribe. Well, you can see how easily that can work with something like Aquarius rising. I mean, they both are just so independent. You know, they wouldn't even want to be around a city. They wouldn't be, you know, what? You know, a relationship that means I have to bond for 20 years? Come on, you know, I mean, you can see there's different pathways here, but the blending of the job with the tribe is foundational. I always start here. I mean, after looking at what that person was expecting from their lineage, and then to see what they're moving toward. Now, as a counseling astrologer, or as just looking at your own chart, one of the things you can easily notice, and maybe you're all thinking about this right now, for some horoscopes, it's a huge difference. The gap between, or the distance between your skill set as your lineage is vastly different than what current life purpose is. Vastly different. But if you had a Libra moon, let's say, and Libra rising, well, then it's just a different version of something you're already a master of. I just there's a comment that came in about what house system. Yeah, in 1999, very strongly influenced by the work of Robert Hand, I experimented with the whole sign house system and discovered that this transpersonal and shamanic approach to looking at a chart works way better in the whole sign house system. I mean, you could be very much identified with another house system, and in fact, I don't. I mean, I've been given reasons by other astrologers about why this house system or that house system might be valuable for this purpose or that purpose. But within this transpersonal and shamanic and initiatory framework, the whole sign house system is when this really comes alive. And been working with it without any deviation, without any second thoughts since 1999, 2000, even having to adjust my own chart.
And mine too. And I just want to say, it is the oldest house system known. So there was what they used to begin in the beginning, like the Hellenistic astrologers way back when they go back and they look at the records, this was the house system that they were using. So everything else, and I feel like all the other house systems became part of some kind of mathematical formula that was created later. And the idea of returning to wholeness through the whole sign house system feels right to me. So I'm just adding that.
And if you want to see more of the technical work on this that has been done recently, I want to refer you to the work of Gemini Brett, who his more recent work, which he's taking to the general astrological community, is really showing through astronomy that the whole sign house system is the one to use for these purposes. Why? Because it's from the center of the Earth out. I mean, it's basically it's the house system of the Earth. Projected into space, and what it's doing is that it's validating or valuing the archetypal approach. You know, the 12 times 12, 144, and so on. Anyway, I love it. I worked entirely with it, and that's how the imagery here we're working with, how it works. But each of you, in fact, we're going to have time here in this session, you know, if some of you may have questions about how do you put together one particular job with one particular tribe, and how those things fit together. And each of you will have your own mythic framework, your own history, your own knowledge, your own connection to the mystery to be able to come up with imagery. It speaks, and this. I'll just reflect on something to show just how unique and how important to understand the purpose of working with this type of astrology. In the early 70s, I lived in Los Angeles, mid 70s, and I took a class. It's actually some of the best known astrologers of my age group. We're all in this class. It's a rather well-known astrologer named Marion March. She was giving these classes to my generation of astrologers back in the 70s and 80s. And I would go to this class, and they would spend, you know, a good hour or two going into this minutia to come up with some judgment about what was happening on that chart, which I was able to see in the first 2 minutes just by looking at using the clues that I'm describing now. Marion took me aside. I mean, she liked me in the class, but she took me aside at one point and said, well, Daniel, what you're talking about is esoteric astrology. And that's not what we're doing in this class, right? And so that's when I became aware of the fact that, that there were some elements of what we're doing here that did exist in the esoteric astrology universe. But their view was kind of like, that's the next life. You know, as if they were saying the Ascendant, and the way we're talking about these storylines, like particularly the one of current life purpose, well, that's what you're going to experience in the next life. Well, in my view, and certainly now at the turning of the ages, you know, where basically everything is up. We don't know what directions things are going to go at this point. You know, the celestial would say new earth, you know, it's like a whole new reality. The aboriginals say that, well, this is not just the end of a cycle, this is the end period, like the end of this, you know, sixth mass extinction as it is. Or, you know, we're going to transform the world here. I'm a middle world guy, actually. Or actually the asteroid hit at any second, you know, so we don't know. We're at a time period of immediacy, you know. It's not like I'm going to wait to the next life. It's kind of like that thousands of lifetimes view may be entirely true, but it's all happening right now. That's why we're all here. So to me, I felt important to be associated with a kind of astrology that helps us get to that life intent that had been perceived esoterically as maybe the next life now. And I've certainly had a great deal of success in working with a lot of folks. I mean, right now, I mean, it's got 50 years of doing this stuff, of people who have followed this set of instructions. Magic happens in their life, which is one of the principles associated with this system, which is the universe is supportive of human beings who consciously align with the cycles they're actually in. Or we could say, actually fulfill the original intent of their birth chart. And then that's to say, to achieve their destiny and to not be subject to their fate. Because there's a difference between fate and destiny. You know, fate would be like your genetics or what your parents put into you. Because the aim of shamanic or transpersonal astrology, the aim of this school from the very beginning has been to allow people to think beyond the cultural the consensus reality, to step out of that. It's a revolutionary act to be able to take on this kind of astrology, actually. And, you know, some can only take it so far, but I sometimes over the years have been asked, you know, maybe a person isn't ready to hear this. You can do a reading for someone and, you know, it's like you could see that, you know, they're locked into their parents' view, they're locked into their peers' view. They're not ready to hear it. Is it responsible to tell them this stuff? I've always felt, and I think, Cayelin, you've had plenty of experiences about this too, that 10 years, you don't know. You ignite a seed. You put a little water on a seed. It sparks something. I think it's our responsibility for people who are open, like meaning someone who comes for a reading. You know, I'm not going to try to convince somebody who's not even open to the possibility of knowing their soul's purpose. I'm not going to try to convince them of that. But if a person comes to a reading, I think it is our responsibility to give them this sense of what is possible for them, what their purpose in life is, right?
Yeah,
And,
it's interesting to have that experience. Like sometimes you just know that the person was kind of lukewarm, didn't necessarily, even when they came to you for the reading, right? Like it's like the connection just wasn't really made. But I've had experiences where people have gotten back to me 2, 3, 4, 5 years later and say, okay, I just re-listened to that reading you did for me, and wow, was it right on? Was it ever what I needed to hear? And they couldn't hear it then, but they could hear it now. So so if you have that experience, just know that you have planted that seed and just trust that whenever it's ready to start germinating, it will.
Yes. So let's put up the screen share, that slide again.
Yeah. What? Yeah, it's a document, but whatever.
Yeah, so the jobs or the majors, remember this imagery can be seen in a number of different ways, different languaging. If you're rising sign, well, I'm Libra rising, I signed up for the University of Libra, right? Or I'm now signing up for the Libra tribe. But what job in that tribe or what major in that tribe? So like, let's say we can use an example of, well, let's look at Capricorn. Capricorn, so person's Capricorn rising. And I think we talked about this a little bit yesterday. One of the endeavors of the Shamanic Astrology Mystery School is in revisioning the mystery schools. I mean, the way they were described even 50 years ago, and certainly the way they were described in Hellenistic times or medieval times, so it's a different time. These things evolve. It's one of the great contributions of the post-Jungians, people like Charles Ponce and other great thinkers that have been on the shoulders of Jung, is the archetypes do evolve. They're not completely eternal structures. It's something we've discussed in the school over the years, is the difference between essence and content. So Capricorn has an essence, but over different time periods in history, there'll be different content. So for example, over the last 2,000 years, it's been exclusively patriarchal and hierarchical in a patriarchal sense, associated with the father, the rules, the regulations, and guilt and shame. And the Saturn has been kind of infected the same way by those viruses we talked about yesterday. So we are revisioning Capricorn to be still having the elder thing, right? You know, those that are in a position of elder authority to a certain extent, but they're in service to the feminine, in service to the earth, in service to the future generations. So if you have Capricorn rising, you've taken on that responsibility. Not necessarily your father's responsibility, not necessarily you know, what the patriarchal culture says is your responsibility, but it's to actually be at the front lines of discovering what can now work for the whole planet, what Rudhyar calls the planetarization of consciousness. And then what would your job be if you happen to have that Capricorn ascendant? And so this applies to men or women. I mean, it's like plenty of men these days know who they work for. They work for her. What do I mean by her? That one woman, you know, the cosmic womb, the all-inclusive first principle, which is feminine. And it's the elder. And a man can be in service to that as much as a woman. And the lawgiver, the provider, the circle of grandmothers. But what about the job? I mean, so if it's the Aries job, if it's a first house job, it's kind of like you feel like you have to do it all yourself. If it's the Libra job, well then, you know, the purpose of life is to have one or more collaborators that you're equal with, that you're not lording it over or under. Because the thing about the Libra place on the wheel is that it is Cayelin. It's horizontal. It's about collaboration and not even the positive version of hierarchy. If it happens to be the Cancer job in the Capricorn tribe, meaning the fourth house, then we're putting together two of them that are the foundational builders of a new world. We're putting together two of the so-called householder or culture bearer ones. Creator of safe space, the mother, father, nurturer, the one who provides nourishment to others. Now look at that, because if it's the Cancer job in the Capricorn tribe for current life purpose, that's going to be a heck of a lot different than if you come into the life with a Cancer moon and or a Capricorn moon with the Cancer job. Because then it's going to mean for lifetimes you've held that position on the wheel. It was probably pretty traditional. And there are plenty of individuals that have, they have no choice. They're heroic individuals that do the best they can with full heart within patriarchal structure. You know, so we're not like criticizing Cancer or Capricorn for being, you know, only the downside of patriarchy. Many heroic individuals, many people with open hearts that have had to be within the framework of patriarchy and that did their best there. But that's a little different than if you now come in with Cancer or Capricorn rising, because now you are the ones who are investigating what the new territory would be there, the builders of a new world. There's so many different places on the wheel, and we certainly in this very short presentation, I mean, we should have mentioned here at the beginning that if those of you, if you had been an Oracle, if we were able to have done the Oracle event, this talk that's happening now would have taken, we had allocated about 5 hours for it. Also, this is material that goes into, you know, a whole online class. For those who don't know it, we're now offering during this lockdown time our online classes. We're offering it for 50% off. So it's a marvelous time to study this in greater depth. But these are the basic tools, and if you want to just as quickly as possible see what your place on the wheel is. And it's not all the same. I mean, some of us are here to be revolutionaries. Some of us are here to be on the mountaintop, you know, like doing the mantras. Some of us are here to keep planting our gardens. Years ago, I'm reminded of when these issues came up. Yeah, I mean, this has been in the air. I mean, it's always near the end of the world. In the 70s, it was near the end of the world. I mean, this always comes up, right? So it's like, well, what do you do? What if you heard directly from Great Mystery that we only have 6 months? I mean, that there's with absolute certainty an asteroid was going to hit in 6 months and the Earth is destroyed. You know, what would you do? If you're Cancer rising, Capricorn rising, you still take care of your family. If you're Virgo rising, or maybe even Cancer, if you're a gardener, you work on your garden. You still plant a garden. You still do your dharma. If you're Aquarius rising, you know, Sag job in the Aquarius tribe, you know, mainly you're basically on the mountaintop, maybe, you know, doing advanced free energy device research, you know. I mean, there's different jobs for different people, but what's most important is to know, to try to find out, to tune in to what is your place. And I cannot imagine a greater gift, and I'm looking at it now from a celestial perspective, a greater gift than these weeks, or who knows, it might be 3 months and maybe 6 months, to have a chance to look at this stuff deeply. You know, hopefully not in a survival situation, you know, to be able to deeply look at what Great Mystery had in mind when you were born. What is your destiny? Now, there were 2 more things that I wanted to share before we open this up. And this is going back to a philosophical point. Astrology, even shamanic astrology, even initiatory astrology, even transpersonal astrology, is the highest of the lower mysteries. Oh, I love telling regular astrologers that. Astrology is the highest of the lower mysteries. Well, what are the higher mysteries? Well, you know, things like grace. How do we really gain self-realization? How does one actually fully get self-love? Those are the higher mysteries. I mean, astrology can give us clues, you know, like maybe it would be better to be in the world than to be on the mountaintop. Maybe it would be better to get married or have a family than to remain a renunciate. I mean, there's clues the chart gives us, but those final steps, you know, those higher mysteries, Astrology is just the highest of the lower mysteries. And I try to explain this in my second book, that astrology is a system of divination that in the history of humanity has blended everything of the lower mysteries into it, but not these higher spiritual mysteries, even though the shamanic astrology is essentially spiritual. These higher mysteries are inexplicable, and certainly it cannot be quantified. It's not a statistic. It's not fixed. Nothing is determined in that sense. I'm going to close this part of it by sharing. I think this is probably, to me, the heaviest, in the best sense of the word, quote that I've never encountered this before until this was sent to me by Bo Taylor. Astrology, and we can say now at this point, shamanic astrology is threshold knowledge. He who is able to use such a knowledge possesses the authority of as yet incomprehensible. And this authority imposes upon the astrologer a heavy personal responsibility, whether he admits it or she admits it or not, whether or not they care to even act accordingly. All knowledge engenders responsibility for the one who shares, or else who refuses to share it for the fear of the responsibility. But the imparting of threshold knowledge with its potent symbols and mysterious entities of forces produces an even greater responsibility. For he who receives the knowledge must accept it on authority and on faith, as a young child is taught by his parents. That's something to chew on, and you will get it as something that goes along with this class. So let's this is open for any kind of sharing or questions, and certainly even practical, as far as, well, what do you think of the fifth, the Leo job in the Capricorn tribe is, or something like that, right?
So people can unmute themselves or raise their hand and jump in, and we'll figure it out. So if you want to raise your hand, I will. Okay, I got a couple of hands raised here. So let me, Shima, it looks like we've got you on.
Hi.
Hi.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
My computer kicked me off, so I had to go on my phone. So.
Hi, Shima.
Hi, Daniel. How are you doing?
We're hanging in there over here.
That's what it's like, isn't it? So listen, I have a couple of questions. I have a question for you. As you probably know, Cayelin came to a panel that I did in Los Angeles.
Yes.
And right before this virus thing really hit hard. And so, but for me, I was really amazed to be able to be there, because right before the expo happened in February, I was recovering from being hospitalized a few weeks earlier. And that was from January 8th to the 14th. And of course, the timing coincided with January's eclipses.
Yes.
And the exact, oh, there I am, okay. And everything. And I couldn't see it initially in my whole sign chart. But when a friend specializes in progressions, and then another, and I do whole sign, and another friend who uses Placidus did my chart, it was apparent that my progressed 20-degree Cancer sun was exactly conjunct the transiting Cancer moon, opposing all the stellium in Capricorn. And Mars had just crossed over my south node in the 6th house. And anyway, a bunch of different things were going on. There was a T-square in my chart. Anyway, I noticed that with the upcoming solstice eclipse, basically, that it's the same points, only opposite. And I was wondering if you have any insights about how that might show up.
There's two things. Number one, we do use in our paradigm, if we're looking at cycles, the placement of the progressed moon, the movement of the progressed moon around the chart is one of the key tools. Okay, so I use that a lot. So the progressed moon position is hugely important.
Okay, but not the sun, just the moon?
Well, the moon is moving 1 degree a month. I mean, the progressed sun, it takes 30 years to go through a whole sign. So the progressed moon position is like a cosmic spotlight that is illuminating what is at the front lines of your life process. The others are moving so slow that they don't really contribute that much information unless they're conjunct something. Okay, that's the techniques we use. It's explored in some depth in our timeline material. The timeline course. The framework about how to ascertain the initiatory process. Were you in the class yesterday?
Yes.
I did discuss.
I listened to it. I listened to a replay. Yeah.
Yeah. So I consider that eclipse coming up is kind of like it's a pair of them. That from the one over Singapore around the solstice last year to the one coming up at exactly at the June solstice, hugely important because it's on the hand of the high man, and certainly anyone who has something in that zone, like around zero Cancer, is really truly on the front lines.
Right. Okay. What happened on this eclipse in January was my progressed sun was on the moon then.
Yeah.
Okay. And the 23 degrees and all that of Capricorn.
Yeah.
So since I ended up in the hospital with something that I would have never ever anticipated, I'm just curious if this next coming eclipse could it be a completion of that, or might it be another? Might it stimulate something coming up again like that? Do you know what I mean? I'm just curious because
we do have in the initiatory work and in the timeline work the sense that transits and of the nodes and plus looking at which, and of course transits of the nodes are very strongly associated with eclipses, is that we're looking at a 6-month process.
Okay, right.
And if you have two that are related on your chart, it could be 6 months on either side, so then you have from one eclipse season to the next eclipse season and the eclipse season after that and the one before that. I'm now, based on what I'm seeing happening in the world, I think that the path of an eclipse is hugely important, even to get clues ahead of time, so it's not like, okay, let's see what happens to the eclipse path, after the eclipse, but even before, because because the one in June is going right directly bullseye over Wuhan and Tibet. But I don't know exactly how to be more specific with you here without having your chart in front of me, using all the tools and techniques I normally use.
Right.
What is the storyline for current life purpose for yourself? Yeah, that's really what I'm wanting to emphasize in our class today.
Right. Well, go on.
Well, I was just going to say, if you don't know that off the top of your head, Chima, we've got like 5 people in line to ask questions.
Okay. Yes, you go right ahead then.
Yeah,
okay.
So maybe we can talk about that later. Okay, great.
Okay, thanks, then.
You're fine. All right, so, and then now Amuna was next. So I'm going to unmute you.
Hi there. This
Hi.
is fabulous. Thank you. I'm going to stay on camera because my internet is so unstable, so you can hear me okay?
Yeah.
So my question is for Victoria, my character. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes. For my character, you may remember that I had this idea for my main character for my next novel. It's got to have a lot of Scorpio. And I just pulled a Sun Scorpio at the right year and just a few things. And here the chart, the first chart that came up on the computer has a stellium in Scorpio, so it's quite amazing. So my question now is, she has her moon in Aries, so that's the tribe, and her south node in the Libra house, in the 7th house. And then she has her rising sign is in Scorpio, and her north node is in the 1st house, so that's Aries.
Yeah. Let me just cover one thing here. The Aries job in the Scorpio tribe. Okay, so the Scorpio Mystery School always is about autonomy, sovereignty. It's strong will. There's no codependency, we could say, unless a person is too addicted to just some kind of the rush of energy, right? Yeah, so it's the Aries job. Then you have two things together that are unbelievably free. It's a complete, we'd say, like a rugged individualist version of the sorcerer's witch. If we look at the lineage part of it, then that was you said it was the Libra job in the Aries tribe. Now that's like the warrior that always has their partner. So there's a willingness for this individual to really embrace an incredibly powerful destiny. Being willing to face the fears, to go to the edge, to revision everything through the courage of their own self.
Okay, thank you.
Yay, thank you, Amuna. That's awesome. All right, now Karina is...
Hi.
Yeah, hi.
Hi. I'm not usually part of you guys, and this is so perfect for me because I've spent my whole life not knowing what I'm here to do. And I've really got into astrology, the last maybe 5 or 8 years or something. Definitely not shamanic. I just heard about it from Gemini Brett in a webinar. And so I'll tell you what I have. I have no idea what house system it is, but this is what I have. I have a Leo moon in the 11th house. I have a Virgo rising, and my south node is in the 9th house.
Well, okay, so you have Virgo rising.
Right.
What is the sign of your north node?
But Scorpio.
Okay, so...
In the 2nd house. That would be the 2nd house north node.
Oh, in the whole house system, you mean?
Yes.
Whole sign house system. So Taurus job in the Virgo tribe, we would call that, or the 2nd house job in the Virgo tribe. Yeah, Virgo rising, right?
Yes, I have 5 planets in Virgo. But again,
So in this system, the main issue for Virgo ascendant, we could say the primary question is, do you know what is your calling? Do you know what's your sacred work?
No, I don't.
Okay, and so what we say for people who have that rising sign is that even if at some point in your life you don't know how to articulate an answer to that question, that is the question, okay? Now, there's clues about what the domain of investigation would be. I mean, clearly throughout history and including the way we see it today, Virgo is Gaia. I mean, Virgo is our Earth Mother, not in a personal sense. So it's the rock formations, it's the wave patterns, it's the starry patterns, it's the herbs, the way they grow, it's actually the rhythms and it's the pattern, the way it's said in the Emerald Tablets, about 3rd or 4th line in the Emerald Tablets. It says, in consideration of the one thing is the pattern, capital P. So Virgo is always going to be obsessed with being in harmony and in touch with, in some way, the pattern. But then if you have the Taurus job, then it's basically saying it's not a renunciate. It's not a monk. Basically, it's more like maybe a Taoist type individual, someone who's embracing the joy and pleasure of being on a garden planet. So there's not a stoicism to it. It's like bringing an Epicurean flavor into that dedication and commitment to your sacred work. Now, as far as whether you are at a timing or not, See, I can't answer that question without knowing your old chart, but you know, there's certain timings that it's about, I don't know what it is, throw it up in the air. There's other times where it's absolutely essential to at least make some kind of a commitment to that calling or that sacred work.
I'm gonna have to, of course, listen to what you just said again. I'm completely devoted to the divine feminine, the divine mother. You know, I'm absolutely, that is my path.
Right.
And
Right.
I don't know that this is part of it, but my progressed moon is a Scorpio moon. And I mentioned in the comments, you know, Sri Aurobindo and the mother were and are my teachers.
Right, right.
And I'm 62 and a half years old now, and I feel like I'm finally at the time on the planet why I was born.
Well, 62 and a half along the timeline is a time of high adventure. It's the Uranian square. Now, but I'll give one more clue, and we can't do a full analysis.
Yeah, no, and just tell me how to start studying shamanic astrology.
Yeah. So look, the Ascendant also gives a clue about where and how to get guidance.
Okay.
Now what I'm going to share with you, you already know in your soul, in your gut.
Okay.
The way of getting guidance for Virgo rising is to be with her, that one woman. You're not going to get it from a person. You're not going to get it from intellect. You're not going to get it from, quote, figuring something out.
Right.
It's finding your own sacred space to go in, whatever that is for you. Whether it's whether it's your garden, whether it's your meditation space, whether it's a forest, whatever it might be. Go directly to her.
Okay, I do, and I am a hermit. Thank you. It's all really relevant, and I know shamanic astrology will really help me. So
and as Daniel mentioned, all the courses, our online courses are 50% off, and I'll include a link when I send this out. So
great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're so welcome.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we're going to go to Kelly, who sent in a request. So.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Cool. I'm going to try to share my screen, so maybe that would help to see what I'm questioning about. But can you see that?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is my husband and I, and he's on the outside, I'm on the inside, and we have opposing nodes and by house as well because our ascendants are opposite, and just was wondering if you had any thoughts on that.
Well, you have the Gemini, so that's you with the Gemini rising?
Yeah.
And I usually don't.
I know, I have like so many different software programs, and this one was like, this one, I'll just use this one.
And his
so the North Node is in the 4th house, Daniel.
Yeah.
With Jupiter, it looks like.
And his ascendant is Sag?
Sagittarius, yeah.
Okay.
We both have Leo moons.
And so your current life, okay, so what I would work with here, so is your question primarily about the nature of your relationship?
Yeah, like I've had this question for a long time because coming from evolutionary astrology, it's like I'm switching my brain over to this system. And so, yeah, I've been wondering about this for so long, looking at our opposite nodes, and it's just fascinating to me. So
well, but the thing is, you have opposite ascendants.
Mm-hmm.
And in the shamanic astrology system, one of the finest of all connections. Now, I'm talking about connections now. Let me just try to be very brief with this. Many psychologists will say we work out our family of origin issues with our spouses, right? But what would it be like if we had a relationship we'd already done that? So now the thing about this connection, you both have the same relationship intent. Gemini Sag, one Sag rising, one Gemini rising. They're a resonant polarity, and that would suggest that the reason you're together is to be trail mates, quest mates. That you must have. It doesn't mean you have to have exactly the same spiritual path, but there has to be an exact, well, let's say, equal priority given to that, to the adventure of life, to the quest for meaning and purpose, to be on the adventure and exploration of spirit and of the quest for the truth and meaning. That would be the reason why you're together. I also want to briefly just state that the way your nodes, that's another one of the techniques to see why people are together. To have the 9.5, what is it, 9.5 years apart?
Something like that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right. That's or 8. I don't know. I mean, or 27.
Well, because his are later degrees, hers are earlier degrees, so it may be more like 8 or something years.
Okay.
But,
but that's also kind of, in a general sense, part of a spiritual karmic group. I mean, it's like one of the things we would look at is like this larger sense of being kin. You know, it's not the same as the really most personal karmic links, you know, but it's like being kin, being like souls that incarnate together for a reason and a purpose, and you have that resonant polarity on your ascendants, and so that's the best in this short period of time. That's the feedback I can give you on.
We could say where you're coming from is where he's going, and where you're coming from is
yeah, that's what I've been thinking. Yeah.
Right. So that you have that. Awesome.
Thanks.
Hope that's helpful. Okay, let's see. What's going on here? I need to get back to the participants. Okay. All right, so somebody else had their hand raised. I think Sheridan, maybe you can unmute yourself, Sheridan, and just jump in, because I'm not finding you. And I think you're, and if there's anybody else, I'm sorry, but I can't see you.
First, I wanted to say the 3 worlds thing, it's been like amazing. Thank you so much, because I've been like sharing that with like my family and my friends and like my clients and my class. And it's like revolutionary for people. So I'm super grateful for that, of how to like navigate the time that we're in. And then my question is, you know, it's cool that we're talking about this, you know, the 144 storylines, because I've been thinking a lot about it with like my ascendant and the house that my North Node is in, because I'm in my Saturn square. And I realized early on in this that Pluto squared my natal Saturn at the time, like just moments after my Saturn square started, which I realized is outer planet to outer planet. But I felt like because I'm in a Saturn square that was actually significant for me, because like a bunch of crap started happening like that day, you know? So I feel like in this time of like this downtime, right? This like break we're all getting forced into, I'm wanting to like explore more of like get really clear on like my ascendant, where I'm going, that kind of stuff. So it's the Leo rising in the Sag job in the Leo tribe. So if you want to talk about one part or the other part or whatever, any of that, I'm interested to hear your thoughts.
Sagittarius job in the Leo tribe.
Yeah.
Well, I do want to also just share that the largest framework on the storyline is this, right? But it would be your Venus position, if you're biologically female, that is the role you would play.
Cancer.
Right. So it's like, how does Venus in Cancer serve that storyline? If you follow what I'm saying. And for men, the Mars, if you're born biologically male, you know, your XY being or whatever, or XY being, then the Mars position is the role you play in that storyline. But in general, the Sagittarius job in any tribe is the explorer, philosopher, the one who goes into new territory. So if the North Node is in the 9th house, then it's like highest octave, looking for the truth. What is the truth? Well, it's a moving target. You know, if you try to attach yourself to a truth, well, then it crystallizes. So it's like this open investigation of new territory. But in the service of what Leo Ascendant is. Now, the bottom line for Leo Ascendant is radiant, radical self-love, knowing that you are creator. The ultimate purpose of the Leo Mystery School is that connection to our autonomous divine connection to spirit, to the divine. So you're questing for that with as a woman with Venus in Cancer, with also the ability to have empathy and compassion and sensitivity. So this is not just some kind of mental or consciousness thing that's taking place. It's like keeping your heart open as you investigate what do you need to do to all the way know that you're divine and that you are worthy of you're giving yourself your own self-love, and that you can create it any way you want. You are creator. That's Leo Ascendant. So you're investigating that with the Cancerian approach to having empathy and compassion.
So would you say it's almost like a self-nurturing is the path to the self-love, and that it's like it's a quest or seeking of that?
Well, but the more you're able to love yourself and know yourself as creator, because you can love yourself, you have more capacity to have compassion and love to give to others.
Right. And with the Sag piece, almost like love with the capital L, right? Like the truth, but the love.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's why I'm totally committed to us being human and not being AI, you know, but having the capacity to have empathy and compassion. I mean, that's what Venus in Cancer is about. But the key for you personally is this all the way quest for self-love and to know you are creator.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sheridan. So I think we're complete now. So just wanting to say thank you to everybody. The next class will be April 2nd, same time with a different Zoom link. And we'll send that information out to you either the day before.
Yeah, just a quick preview on that. The subject matter is actually to put a lot of attention on the 2021 Uranus Saturn square and the dynamic between Taurus and Aquarius, and this whole investigation of the shadow of Aquarius as well as its gifts. So that will be what we did not cover enough. There's so much to cover yesterday. That'll be what we look at.
Right. So good. All good stuff. Thank you all so much for being here. We look forward to seeing you on April 3. That happens to also be the day that Venus is closest to the Pleiades. Looks like it will be sitting right in the Pleiades. Definitely something worth seeing if you get a chance, and watch it over the next few nights, because that's something that won't happen again for 8 years. And I have a little video on that you can get on the main class page. So.
So we did this class. I mean, at least where I am is where the moon was at 29 Taurus. So, so it's like right there, right now.
Right.
Crown chakra and
right. Venus and the moon. The moon will be just past Venus tonight. So depending on where time zone you're in, if you get a chance to go out and look, be sure and check that out. Yeah, absolutely. So we'll look forward to seeing you all next week. So bye, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Everybody stay safe and healthy.
Yes.
Up you
Bye.
too.
Thank you.
Bye from Kadia. Bye-bye.
Bye.